Please welcome to the stage CEO and co-founder of Alloy Automation, Sara Du.
Good afternoon. How many people here, raise your hand if you're over 3 shots of espresso in? Not that many people. Well, the reason I ask, I was seeking some solidarity because I actually just came in from Tokyo, so it's like 2 a.m. right now, and I was very excited to fly 6,000 miles to spill some juicy tea on building a venture-backed Shopify app. So today I'll be kind of talking about how you can get to this end state of raising at least 27 million funding and growing from maybe just a small app that you're building in your room to a A16Z, YC, et cetera, backed company. So before I kind of dig into any of this, what is Alloy? A lot of people are super confused about what we do. So we're very similar actually to Zapier or Shopify Flow. So we're an automation tool for brands to essentially, like I like to call it, getting rid of bitch work so that they can work on more meaningful things. So we allow brands to connect the different operations apps they use. We can allow them to connect Klaviyo to, say, like Recharge with some more logical workflows that move data across those apps. So we have that, and then we also have a second product called Alloy Embedded that allows software companies to embed integrations using our SDK. So we have 2 products now, and we're a 30-person company. And so how did we get here? This is, I guess I'll start with my background, and I assume most people here are technical, so I'll give the more nerdy version of my background. I got started with C++ when I was 16. It's like a super unsexy coding language. I actually built a lot of Bluetooth open source frameworks for iOS. And so actually there's a lot of parallels to Apple's early developer ecosystem and kind of what I see with Shopify's. As you know, there are a ton of billion-dollar companies in Apple's ecosystem, and I think there's potential here as well, as we're seeing with giants like Klaviyo, Yotpo, et cetera. So I got started there. I ended up getting into a similar space to where I am today at a place called Do Not Pay. So that app does exactly what it says. It lets you not pay for legal fees, parking tickets, et cetera, and that's through something called robotic process automation. So building scripts that allow you to essentially automate actions on websites that don't have APIs, particularly government websites, parking tickets. They're all on these like really crappy pages. So that's what I did. Built a lot of infrastructure there. Got me thinking about automation. I was like 18 at the time and had left high school. I actually decided I didn't want to be a high school dropout engineer, and so I decided to apply to Harvard and got in for undergrad. And actually when I got in, I was able to look at my application files, and apparently I almost didn't get in because I wore ripped jeans to my interview, and they wrote that down in the notes, and they ended up sending my portfolio of code to the dean of CS. And the only reason I got in was because the dean of CS liked my code and was like, we have lots of Nobel Prize winners who dress horribly, so why should we care? Ripped jeans are kind of the new thing, right? So I went there for a year of undergrad and realized school wasn't really my jam, and Silicon Valley moved a lot faster, and I already had that comparison since I worked at that startup pre-college. So I left school, and now we call it dropping out because I never went back. But I left and ended up working at Snapchat for a bit as an engineer, and then at Wish as a designer. So my background is in both engine design. And then I actually started Alloy with a longtime friend of mine as a side project. And so we didn't think much of it. I don't know how many of you here are hacking on Shopify apps, but we actually worked on lots of like iOS apps together, maybe 7 or 8, and then a bunch of web apps. So this was like one in a string of projects, and we didn't expect anything of it. So we actually, for context, my co-founder Greg and I, we met because I was organizing a hackathon in high school, and I invited him to come speak at it. And we ended up meeting at some Apple developer conferences, one of them called WWDC. So I think like Shopify Unite is a version of that as well. So that's how we became friends and started building together. Alloy started as this we built the base of this workflow engine, and then today it's grown to this like ecosystem of over 220 or so integrations. So that's not the bulk of the work. I'd say the bulk of the work is still in the workflow engine, but integrations is a huge part of how we've grown and gone to market. So today I'll be talking more about the go-to-market of building a venture-backed company as opposed to telling you guys how to build, since I think you all know how to do that. So that was actually when we first launched in November of 2019. We would always do these product hunt launches, but Alloy clearly was supposed to be a company because overnight it just like blew up, went to #1. The founder of Webflow reached out and ended up becoming our first angel, but we got a lot of inbound interest from investors through that first launch. So 0 connections to VCs at the time. When I started Alloy, I was like 18 or 19, so had no idea how this worked, and it was just really a side project. But through the journey, we've also had lots of failures, and we've been rejected from the App Store before as well. So if you get rejected multiple times, don't worry. Cool. So there's three sort of strategies I'll be talking about today. The first of which is storytelling. So I think that's actually a really important base to set up while you're also building the Shopify app of yours. So for us, we've gone through lots of iterations of telling the story of Alloy. And it's especially important for us because a lot of people, it's really hard to tell you in one sentence what we do unless we say, like, we're like Zapier. And you already, there's an analogy of a company already. Or we can say, we're like if this, then that. So we like to start with this key thesis that right now, the way your store operates is pretty messed up. You got like a tangle of apps, right? And some apps integrate to each other and some don't, and you kind of have to find workarounds. And so Alloy is the way to untangle that and to be the center from which all of your different apps can connect to each other. So that was V1 of the way we told our story. V2, we started to get more in-depth. One key strategy we started using is evoking emotion through visuals. So here, the hope is that you as a store, if you're a store owner, you're like, oh God, I totally get what you mean. I literally feel pain thinking about having to do this and how my store currently looks. We usually, in sales calls, will tell the merchant to map out their workflows, and it's a pretty gnarly task. And then we also use logos that people know, and we actually started to figure out based on popular integrations on our platform, which a merchant would most likely use. And so we kind of change up this graphic depending on who we're talking to. And then we're like, here's the solution, right? We show you that disgusting page and we're like, here's Alloy. This is the fix to that frustration you were just feeling on the previous slide. So very clean, very easy. That's the solution slide. And then nowadays, we also try to tell the story with a bit of a historical foundation, and also this version of the story is more based on you, the store, and how you feel and how you have grown and how you've seen the e-commerce tooling landscape change. So you start with, this is your store. And you can be it used to be simpler, back in the early 2010s, you didn't have that many tools. You just had a store on Shopify maybe, and people didn't expect much. But consumers now, they want more, and now you have more tools, and it's pretty crazy. So this is why you need to use this thing called automation. So another key thing that we had to do through our journey of building this company is define automation. Because a lot of people say automation, technically we are business process automation since we connect the full landscape of tools, but there's obviously supply chain automation. There's many verticals of it. So this is why you need to set up the context of what you're building, because oftentimes you can say you're a marketing tool and no one really knows what you mean. So storytelling is very key, especially to fundraising. And then partnerships is another huge and under-leveraged go-to-market strategy, and that happens these days through integrations. So you as developers have an advantage here. And so first off, as we know, the Shopify App Store itself has been blowing up. So even within this ecosystem, you don't need to go to BigCommerce. You can just go to all these other apps, the people you're seeing here, set up partnerships, build to each other, and that's a huge market opportunity. This is a more visual way of looking at it, but there's tons and tons of logos, some more recognizable than others, but we've, through our almost 3-year journey now, we've seen apps that were previously unknowns, become really well-known apps. So you shouldn't discount people because their logos are not recognizable yet. You should truly integrate based on functionality and where you see product-based synergies. And then when it comes to partnerships, we also use more content-focused partnership strategies. So we always, when we build an integration, we work really hard actually on the tail end of the launch. So we actually care more about how we're distributing news about this integration, the way we talk about and product market the functionality, all of that. And so if you check out our blog at runalloy.com/blog, you'll see it's a lot of this stuff. We're really amplifying partners, giving to the ecosystem, and we get love back. So that really helps. And then we also do a lot with, in terms of like seasonal ebooks, like essentially creating content that benefits our partners, right? Like in this ebook, we're talking about how you as a, well, actually this one is for merchants, but typically releasing ebooks around how partners of ours can build better businesses by working with us. And then social proof is very key. You can use people's faces, not just their logos. So I don't know how many of you know Casey. He's a great face to have, and some of our customers as well. There's all these creative ways to use human psychology and partnerships to increase your leverage and distribution. This is the end goal, though. The end goal is to build a partner program where you can truly give back monetarily. So we're not there yet, but I think this screenshot is great because when Shopify announced that, I feel like the whole community was like super pumped. And finally, the last point I'll talk about is just the concept of building like a movement, right? I think often, like in this room, we might just talk about our businesses as Shopify apps. Maybe you can say we also support BigCommerce, Magento, whatnot, but ultimately, like each of us are kind of building a movement, whether that's like Klaviyo building like this whole movement around better customer messaging, right? Or us, we're making people care about integrations and automation, like things that you basically need to position your company and make your merchants think about like a new model of thinking about the ecosystem. Before we kind of came onto the scene, I think people really didn't think about integrations, or at least merchants didn't. And so we started talking about it a lot, talking about automation, and that was really key to our growth. Also, I think it's really important when you're establishing a new category or creating a movement that merchants don't already think about, you need to work backwards and create frameworks for them that lead them to think about that thing. So to put it more simply, we put together this page called the e-commerce tech stack. So we launched the first version of it, I think in November of 2020, so 2 years ago now. And it kind of blew up. It went viral. And I think a lot of merchants, before they saw that graphic, they never thought about a stack. Like I think we as developers, it's really, like we talk about stacks all the time, but merchants never thought about their like stack and like never just put it together in one visual. And so once we created this framework for them to think about it, it made it much easier for us to then push the value of integrations and automation and all of that. And then finally, I think the biggest lever is the community, the chatter, Twitter, events, all of that. So to the extent you can leverage that early on, like even if you're a solo developer building your app, that is very powerful. So yeah, I'll leave you with that. You can follow me on Twitter at Sara Duit, D-U-I-T, and I'm happy to take any questions. Can't really see. Oh, there we go.
So going back to the fundraising, how are you able to like quantify the automation into ROI for the merchants? Like how were you able to say like we saved this much time and thus we're going to create X value?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to quantify the value. One is saving costs from like engineering, whether that's in-house or third party. Second is time savings. Third is enabling you to create workflows that you otherwise just couldn't with your existing tools. So it's almost like unlocking a new like marketing channel or strategy. Great. I think that's it. The shy. Oh, there we go. One non-shy person.
Perfect. How do you see the adoption of this automation across different business models like B2C, B2B, or another way like enterprise versus like mid-market? Because usually, I guess, enterprise is probably more thinking about automation, but just wondering what's your experience with that?
Yeah, so we actually grew mostly through a product-led motion, and so we have a lot of free customers. We don't want to bar smaller merchants from using us because I think it's really good to get people exposure as soon as possible to the concept of automation. So we have recipes for small merchants to use, and usually if you're below like 20 mil in GMV, you probably don't really have a serious need for it, so you can stay on us for free. We're seeing mostly teams that have like an e-commerce manager, maybe even an engineer, like brands like that, they're the ones who can really benefit. So on the larger end of things, we have customers like Burberry, folks like that.
Hi, I have two questions. One, do you have a free plan? And if you do, is it more important to have a lot of customers or is it better to have paying customers?
It's almost like you can, if you have like higher ACVs, you can have fewer customers. If you have lower ACVs, you probably want more, right? So we do have a free plan. We worked on like more of an upsell motion for that. And yeah, I'd say actually like in terms of fundraising, it's more about usage, right? Like if you're gonna do the free path, like you obviously want to be building a product people love, and that's what BCs want to see. Great. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.